Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to another episode of News Dose, where I keep you up to date with all of the latest news in the gaming industry. Today we have a lot of things to talk about, especially when it comes to the next generation consoles, or more specifically, the PlayStation 5, because quite a bit of information has started to come out over the last few days. We may actually have a hint as to when the PlayStation 5 will be unveiled, and then the specs that was leaked last week are starting to look a little bit more realistic. We even got some information on a possible change to the PlayStation 5 controller, which I personally find to be very cool. We do have a few other things to talk about as well, including a possible Xbox acquisition, The Witcher 3, and more, so stay tuned for that as well. But first, I do want to get right into the PlayStation 5 news. The first of which is the PlayStation 5 specs, because I did talk about this last Friday, and I've really been critical towards insiders because I haven't exactly found them to be very trustworthy up to this point about the PlayStation 5 specs. But yes, the AMD internal tests have indeed leaked online, which appears to be very legitimate. And if this actually ends up being true, I was very right for not taking all of these insiders serious. This is the real deal, but on Friday I did, however, question whether or not it was outdated or not. Maybe it was possible that this was an early dev kit or something, but Digital Foundry, which knows a lot more about this stuff than I do, pointed out some very interesting things as they broke down all of the information on that leak and just how powerful the PlayStation 5 actually is based off of those specs. I do recommend you to go watch the video yourself because Digital Foundry, they definitely know their stuff. Now, the first thing to consider here is that Digital Foundry actually broke down the rumored specs, and they did seem to believe that those specs were very possible of what we will see in the PlayStation 5, which would place the PlayStation 5 at 9.2 teraflops, which is a significant decrease compared to Xbox Series X, which is estimated to be 12 teraflops. I mean, we're talking about roughly a 25% to even 30% power gap between the two, so that is pretty big if this is actually true. Though, as I talked about last week, I wasn't really convinced at that time that these specs was accurate to be the finalized version of the PlayStation 5, but Digital Foundry did point out that developing a processor is a multi-year development cycle, and it would almost be impossible to make changes now being so close to the release. They did, however, say that they could change the clock speeds, but based off the timeline, it appears that Sony has already done that as well, so this may actually be what the PlayStation 5 sits at. So it does appear that I was wrong about it possibly being outdated. Though it is important to note here that we still don't completely understand the context of these specs in the AMD internal test, so we can't be 100% sure that this is the absolute specs, but this is the best source we have as of this moment. And one last thing about this Digital Foundry video was that they did talk about price near the end and said that the PlayStation 5 does seem in line with a $400 console. And that's something I've been talking about on this channel for a while now. I believe that Sony thinks that $400 is the sweet spot, so that may be their goal. Which really brings us to the next question. What will the price be for Xbox Series X? And I really wouldn't be shocked if this thing is over $500. I mean, sure, $500 would probably be the best case scenario, but we do need to remember that it will be a series of devices, and the Xbox Lockhart will be geared towards being more affordable, and I wouldn't be surprised if they also come out with an all-digital Xbox Series X to slash another $50. Either way, the Xbox Series X truly looks like it's going to eat monsters for breakfast by this point. I mean, it has a lot of power behind it. They have Xbox Game Pass, they've been investing a lot into their first-party studios, so yeah, the Xbox brand is looking very promising for next generation. Now, speaking of next generation, we do have a little bit more information on the PlayStation 5, including both the controller and when we may possibly see the unveiling of the console. I'm not really convinced of this second part just yet, but Sony did put out a banner about CES 2020 that says, and I quote, "The future is coming. At CES 2020, Sony is unveiling a unique vision of the future." And this has brought forth a lot of speculation that it's possibly the place that they will reveal the PlayStation 5. I think it's more than likely that it would be TV related, honestly. That's just my opinion. I think CES would be an odd place to show the PlayStation 5 for the first time ever. Granted, I was surprised about the Xbox Series X being at the Game Awards. I wouldn't have really expected that, but that is one of the biggest gaming events of the entire year, where CES isn't really known for gaming per se. I think it's much more likely that they'll show off something like their new TV with something like HDMI 2.1, which will be a big deal for next generation consoles. It is something that's being a little overlooked by gaming fans right now, but HDMI 2.1 is a big step forward in TVs, especially on the gaming side of things. It does allow for 120Hz, and that is just going to allow for a much smoother gaming experience, especially considering there should theoretically be an increase in frame rate next generation because we are getting much better processors. So yeah, I'm not really expecting the PlayStation 5 to be unveiled at CES 2020, but I'd be glad to be wrong here. I'm ready to see it, and I would love to see the specs for this thing. Now, one last thing about the PlayStation 5, we got to see a new patent for the upcoming controller, which reveals that there may be back buttons included on the DualShock 5. I would personally love that. We did just see them add a new peripheral to add these buttons to the DualShock 4, and I thought that was a nice addition, but it would be great to see them add these buttons as a standard going into next generation. This would actually be one of the best additions to first-party controllers in a very long time, or at least in my personal opinion. It has been my favorite thing about both the Valve controller and the Xbox Elite controller, so I'd like to see this. Moving on though, we do have some news outside of just PlayStation. This one I found to be really intriguing, and this one it's a little bit more speculation than anything, but Xbox's Aaron Greenberg was in Japan this weekend, and he posted this on Twitter and how he was making friends there. The thing is, we know Xbox is looking to acquire a Japanese studio, and one studio that has often been heavily debated on has been White Owls, and based off this picture, that speculation is only going to grow from here on out. He does have an owl on his shoulder here, and while this doesn't really mean they'll be acquiring White Owls for sure, the rumors are definitely going to grow. This very possibly could just be Xbox trying to strengthen their relationships to get more third-party Japanese games on Xbox. I mean, we have seen them do that in recent years, and they've brought over Kingdom Hearts, they got Final Fantasy, Nier Automata, and Yakuza to name a few. Or maybe they're possibly doing some shopping there. We do know for a fact they want to acquire a Japanese studio, so it wouldn't really surprise me. What do you think though? Will they acquire a Japanese developer before next generation? Let me know in the comments below. In other news, and we touched up on this last week, but the Witcher Netflix series has had a bit of a side effect where it's getting a lot of people to either return to The Witcher 3 and play it again, or people are just flat out buying it for the first time. Well, that does work out with the recent Steam sale, and then you also have The Witcher 3 that just released on Xbox Game Pass, but on Steam it actually has broken its current record with the most concurrent players ever. That is pretty unbelievable when you think about it. That means it had more concurrent players with 94,000 than it did the day it launched. That is crazy to think about. The Witcher show is really good though, and I'd highly recommend it. And of course, I think The Witcher 3 is an all-time great game, so I'm really happy to see it having so much success. Now, one last thing I do want to talk about for just a moment here is Supraland, which has went on to sell 100,000 units. This is a game that is very often overlooked. You may not have even heard about it, but this is actually a really good game. I bought it on Steam earlier this year, and it's a very high-quality game. It's like a 3D Metroidvania platformer, and honestly, if you haven't heard about this game, you may want to go look into it. It may actually surprise you. Anyways, though, that's it for this episode, but if you liked the video, don't forget to hit that bell notification and subscribe button. Peace out.